Before we get into this week's episode of the Spinning Heel Kick podcast, I want to let you guys know of one of the hottest brands out right now. It's Dropkick Apparel, based out of Akron, Ohio. One of the hottest wrestling shirts out in the business right now. A lot of your favorite wrestlers are wearing the shirt. Peyton Royce, Becky Lynch, and this week's guest of the podcast, Santana Garrett. So if you haven't checked out Dropkick Apparel, you need to go do that now at dropkickapparel.com. And go get yourself a shirt. Get yourself 2 shirts, 3 shirts. Get some stickers. Support the cause. Support pro wrestling. And support Dropkick Apparel.
Time to tune into. It's time to get hungry for. Let's talk wrestling on the Spinning Heel Kick podcast. It's time to tune into. It's time to get hungry for. Let's talk wrestling on the Spinning Heel Kick podcast.
It's the Spinning Heel Kick podcast with your host AJ, as always, bringing you another episode of the podcast. This week is episode 34 of the podcast, and it's a very special podcast episode. It's featuring one of the top talents in the women's division all over the world. One of my favorite. She was listed top 5 in the Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine of wrestlers, and it's Santana Garrett. Santana Garrett is just phenomenal. She is a phenomenal talent. Probably the sweetest person I know, but I know I say that often, but that's just because I'm so lucky that I get to meet so many cool people and get to have these conversations with them, and they end up being the sweetest people in the world, and I'm blessed for that. But this week, a great conversation with Santana. We get into, her early career. We talk a lot about her training, growing up, having a father that was involved in pro wrestling, and then kind of following up on that, and her being a second-generation superstar. And I think a lot of people never realized that she was a second-generation superstar. And we get into that. We talk about a lot of different things, her favorite matches. This was recorded the same week that she was going to go against Thunder Rosa, who they were going to compete at the Las Vegas Cauliflower Club event that week. And I was trying to get it released that same week, but it was just kind of hard to do. I wanted to take my time with this podcast episode and release it at a time I thought would be perfect, and I thought this would be a perfect time to do it, just because she was out there in Japan recently, and I think we recorded this a few days before she went to Las Vegas, and then just last week she went to Japan, and she actually wrestled one of my former guests of the show, Alex Lee, and they had a great match. They're killing it. But I like Santana Garrett a lot because, she's not just talented and beautiful, but she has a different style to her. She comes out, she wrestled Alex Lee in a Batman, gear. And that's something that I really like, because you're bringing in, the modern stuff, things that catch people's eyes. And then on top of that, you're a great wrestler. So, those are the type of things that take you far. And it's shown that she has gone far, man. If you've ever seen this picture of Santana Garrett, where she's literally having titles all over her arms, it's kind of like Mike Tyson. I think there's a picture like Mike Tyson, who just has a ton of titles around him, and she has a picture like that, and I think it's so iconic, and it's so cool to see that, and see a female pro wrestler have that type of picture and just gather all these titles. It's so awesome, and it was so awesome to have her on the show, and I really hope you guys all enjoy this podcast episode with her and my talk with her about everything pro wrestling. But it's been a cool couple of weeks, man. I'm going out to these shows a lot. I spent maybe like the past 3 weekends going to local independent shows, and they all have been great. I'm so much fun. And one of the cool things is people starting to notice who I am and take recognition of my work, and they come up and take the time to tell me, hey, you're doing great. Keep up the good work. We enjoy your podcast. And I think the interesting thing for me is, like, I've never had to do this. I've never had this experience of people coming up to me and telling me they enjoy my work. They like listening to me talk, listen to me do interviews. And it's still all new to me, and it's very interesting how to take it. And, like, it humbles me a lot, but I don't know how to take it. But it's a pretty damn cool feeling. And somebody came up to me yesterday at a local show and told me, hey, I just checked out your podcast, and I listened to the first one, and I really enjoyed it. And to me, like, my response is always, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, taking the time to listen into my podcast and trying to support my podcast. It's something I truly, truly, truly appreciate. and I tweeted out something. You know, I got put over on Twitter by another listener saying that, you know, keep up the good work. You know, it's good base. Like I'm good. I'm solid. And my reply was, you know, thank you. I appreciate the support and I appreciate the feedback, because receiving feedback is the way to evolve. And the more I hear feedback from the listeners, is the more confident I get. You know, if they're good ones, you know, it brings you up. You know, your ego gets a little big, but you know, it gives you that confidence of keep going into this and keep releasing more episodes and getting more guests. And even when I hear the criticisms or some negative feedback or some things I can work on, I take that and I use that as my motivation. And that goes into my, you know, I like to have these motivational talks. Is I know a lot of people out there, whether you're working your, you know, 9-to-5 job, or you're out there in school and you know, you get your grades back and it's not the best, or your boss tells you, hey, you know, your numbers ain't right this week. What are you going to do differently? Or, you know, your job might be on the line. But you have to take all of that and you have to use it as motivation. If you get a D on a test, you need to figure out what are you going to do differently to raise that up to a B. You know, I'm not shooting for the A plus, you know, even though you should always push for the A plus. But what am I going to do differently to get to that B or possibly get to the A? You know, what are some things that you have to do when it comes to work? Okay, you need to go up to your manager or your boss, your supervisor, whoever it is that's in charge, and ask them, okay, if my job's on the line or if I'm doing something wrong, what do you suggest me to do in order for me to be good with the work or provide you the numbers that you need? And this is all just examples that I'm using. But don't be afraid of asking for criticism and taking it and using it, you know, to help better yourself, because we all have something to improve on. We all got to work on something to continue becoming better people and becoming better at what we do for a living, or being a better whatever, you know. You always got to take the criticism to learn that, and, you know, keep at it. Don't ever let it hold you down. Don't let it overthink it. You know, take that in. Think to yourself, okay, I'm gonna, you know, I heard this from this person. What can I do? What can I change about myself? Or, you know, when I do my job, what am I gonna do differently? What am I gonna tweak to be a better person or be a better employee? So for everybody out there that kind of struggles with that and struggles to hear the criticism or feels not appreciated, it's just like, hey, you know, work your ass off. If you're not receiving the feedback that you want to hear, okay, let's figure it out. Let's do something about it, and, you know, let's get where you want to be, and continuously to evolve as a person, as a worker, as anything you want to be, and go out there and reach those dreams that you want to catch, or just any goals that you want to accomplish in the short term or long term. So that's my little motivational speech. We're gonna jump into this interview with Santana Garrett. This is she's definitely on my wish list. I have this wish list of wrestlers that I want to speak to, and she is definitely on top of the list. So it was very cool for me to finally get her on the show, and I really hope you guys all enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time talking with Santana, and I hope we're going to do another part to it, because we left out some stuff that, you know, most people would want to hear about, but I left it out on purpose because it gives me another reason to have her on the show, and we can talk in more detail about those experiences that we left out. So once again, thank you guys all for the support. Follow Spinning Heel Kick Podcast on Twitter at Spinning Heel Kick Pod, Instagram at The Spinning Heel Kick Podcast. Give a like on Facebook.com/Spinning Heel Kick Podcast. And keep supporting the podcast. Keep giving me that feedback. Keep motivating me to better myself and to evolve as a podcaster. So one of these days I can get signed and get a contract with one of these top companies, because that's my dream. That's my goal, and I'm shooting for it, and I'm going to make it happen. But I need the support of all my listeners out there and all the fans and just anybody that's been supporting me since day one. Please continue supporting me, and I support back. So let's do this. Let's take over the world and achieve all your dreams. And we are on with the Spinning Heel Kick Podcast. And holy moly, I really didn't think this was going to happen. Finally got one of the wrestlers that I had on my wish list 6 months ago when I started this podcast. I got the lovely Santana Garrett on the podcast. How you doing, Santana?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me. I don't do these often, so this is a treat for me, for you, and for all of the fans.
It's definitely a treat because, you know, like I mentioned, I started this podcast 6 months ago, and you're just kicking ass on the indie scene right now. And the fact that I have you on the podcast to talk about wrestling and just life in general is really, I'm gonna say, it's an honor to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
So, I'm just going to jump into it. I saw a picture that you posted, I think just a few days ago, in a ring gear that was Batman related. And I might say, one of my favorite outfits ever. I'm just being honest.
What was the question?
I said it was one of my favorite outfits ever, the Batman themed gear.
Thank you. I try to keep up with like what's popular at the time. Or, not always. Sometimes I just, have random like inspiration. I'm like, oh, I want to make wrestling gear based off of that. I do make all of my own wrestling gear. But yeah, the Batman Superman is pretty popular right now with the movie coming out or just recently came out. So I decided to be Batman. Other sets of gear, I've done Ninja Turtles, I've done My Little Pony. I've done all kinds of things, but yeah, I try to see, what's popular at the time and kind of base some of my outfits off of that from time to time.
So my question was, did you get a chance to watch Batman versus Superman?
I didn't. I actually don't even remember the last time I went and saw a movie in a theater. Like, it's been so long.
This is a damn shame. What are you doing this podcast with me? Let's go watch Batman and Superman.
Okay, you know what? Yeah, forget this. Let's go. We'll just take pictures and post them.
Yeah. That's crazy. Like, and I was really thinking about it. I work a 40-hour gig, every week, and then I do the podcast, and I feel like I have like no time to myself. But how do you do it? Because you're constantly doing shows every weekend. I don't know if you work a full-time job as well, but like, how do you get time to yourself where you can like take care of yourself and do whatever it is to kind of decompress from pro wrestling and everything else?
You know what? I feel like I eat, sleep, breathe pro wrestling. I mean, I'm training 3 times a week at the wrestling school, sometimes 4 times a week, twice a day. I help out a lot with the newer girls starting at the school, and got shows on the weekends, lots of traveling, but I still make time to do my own thing. And then, I've been fortunate. Wrestling has really picked up for me over the last couple of years. So, I don't necessarily need my shoot job anymore, which I enjoy that as well, though. I'm a sleep technologist, which not a lot of people know. But I basically put people to sleep, and I treat their sleep disorders.
Oh, wow. How was that ever like a job that can become very intense?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge responsibility. I'm monitoring patients by myself. I'm monitoring their heart and their sleep patterns, and it's a pretty high responsibility job. But I love it. I love the pressure. I love my boss, and it's a great job.
Well, what's funny? Why isn't your finisher a sleeper hold?
Well, because my finisher, the Shining Star Press, is so much cooler. But yeah, it kind of goes with what I do.
So
I use that move from time to time, though.
It's good.
That's a sleeper.
Little shout out to where you came from. It's pretty cool because I listened to your podcast. I want to say it was from a couple of years ago with Gerwig.net.
Okay, yeah, that was actually like 4 years ago.
So it's really cool to be able to listen to that, and you were talking about my goals are to wrestle at the top companies, this and that, and like 4 years later you've done that and much more. How does that feel? Oh my goodness!
How what?
How does that feel to be able to kind of go, if you go back and listen to that podcast episode that you did with Gerwig, and now look at yourself and think, holy cow, like I actually made all this happen?
Yeah, I'll definitely have to go back and listen to that and just see where my mind was at that moment in time. But it feels amazing. I just did a short interview last weekend, and I was sitting there and I'm thinking, like, when I first started, I wanted to be a professional wrestler. I wanted to travel the world, and I wanted to be the champion of some of these major companies, such as Shimmer, such as the NWA. And I actually remember there weren't a lot of girls around when I first started, but Mischief would come down every so often. And at the time, I believe she was the Shimmer and the NWA World Women's Champion. And I remember looking at her and I'm like, wow, you know what? I really think I can do this. And that's exactly what I want. And I've worked extremely hard, and it definitely hasn't been a walk in the park. And I've worked my butt off, but it's all paying off. I mean, last year alone was just absolutely amazing. I'm never been the Shimmer champion, but last year I won the Shine Championship. I defeated girls such as Mia Yim to win the title. I beat Eva Leafs and many other top names, Allison Kay, Evie. And, that to me was a huge accomplishment. And then not only winning the Shine Championship, but also winning the NWA World Women's Championship from Barbie Hayden last year. It's a huge deal. So it feels pretty darn amazing.
And it just shows, too, I think, for a lot of the younger generations out there, is if you put in the work, like, things can happen. You can become really successful. And, I think most people forget that you're a second-generation star. Your dad was Kenny G. How was it growing up with a dad who was in professional wrestling?
Yeah. Growing up, he was a fan. He was a fan of professional wrestling. Therefore, I was a fan of wrestling. I come from a very big family. I have 5 little brothers and I have 2 sisters. So I didn't get a lot of one-on-one time with either of my parents, who were separated at a very young age. They separated when I was 4. So I didn't have a lot of time, one-on-one with my dad or with my mom. But wrestling was the time for me and my father. Like, that was our time. When wrestling came on, all right, everybody else wasn't really interested in it, my family members, but that was our time to, connect and to bond. And we were just really big fans of wrestling. And I remember being a young girl and seeing my dad follow his dream, because he was a fan. And then he began to train to become a professional wrestler. And then eventually he became a promoter. So it was really cool getting to see him follow his dream. And, he may have not made it as far as, WWE or anything like that, but he had a feeling of accomplishment, and so did I, getting to see him. And it's just it's pretty neat, and to be able to follow like in his footsteps. I know he's very, very proud of me, so pretty good.
And that's such an awesome story. I actually had Lane Rosario, who's Cherry Lane, talk about how her and her dad used to go to wrestling shows all the time, and then she finally was able to wrestle in front of her dad. How was that feeling? Because it seems like you and your dad had kind of like the same setting, where you got to see your dad wrestle, and then I'm assuming he got to see you wrestle as well. So how was the feeling seeing your dad wrestle for the first time?
I thought it was so cool, and I'd go to school and I'd be like, yeah, my dad's a professional wrestler. And I think all the kids, they either think I'm like crazy and that I was lying, or they think I was really cool. But yeah, I was very proud of my dad. That's a pretty cool job title, professional wrestler. And it was cool because on the weekends, he'd take me to the shows with him. So was familiar at a young age what the behind the scenes type stuff was. I'd help out at the shows any way I could, whether it was selling popcorn or taking tickets at the door. So I kind of grew up in wrestling, and I think it has, prepared me pretty well, for when I actually started training and everything.
So, like, a quick question that I have, and I think it's an interesting question, is when you were that age, when you were watching your dad wrestle and, seeing him become a promoter, did they still keep kayfabe in front of you?
I didn't even, at that age, I probably just didn't even pay much attention to what was what, but, the guys go to the ring and they're one thing, and then, they come back, and there's no way, the guys are going to sit there and yell at me or yell at some of the other little kids and be that same character as they were when they were out in front of everybody. So no, I'd say they didn't. But again, I probably didn't pay much attention to that when I was that young.
Yeah, exactly. You're just too, for any young fan, they're caught up in the glitz and glamour of seeing everything and all the characters. So, no one would probably notice that. You mentioned training, so that transition of being a fan and then deciding this is something you want to invest in and become a pro wrestler. When did you make that decision that you wanted to become a pro wrestler, and how did you go about it with telling your dad?
Well, I knew when I was younger. I remember being in middle school, and I knew that I wanted to be a professional wrestler. All my friends, they're like, oh, when they grow up, they want to be doctors or nurses or even younger, they wanted to be professional dancers. Well, I knew in middle school when I grew up, I want to be a professional wrestler. So I knew at a young age that that's what I wanted to do. I throughout middle school, I would get in the ring and kind of roll around, and I'd have my dad teach me a thing here or there. So I was already familiar with, a little bit, but very, very little. But I did want to pursue a career and have a career started before I ever started to take it seriously and really train. So that is the reason I moved out to St. Louis, Missouri. I'm actually born and raised in Central Florida, Ocala, Florida. Very, very country, very small town. But I moved out to St. Louis, Missouri to go to school and figure out my career. And then I just happened to start training out there as well at the same time.
You trained under Larry Zbyszko, correct?
I had a couple of months before moving back to Central Florida. I trained at Dynamo Pro and had a couple months there. I had my first match there, which, I skipped over that part of the question, but I was there for my dad's first matches, and then he, of course, was there for my first match. And I remember I was so nervous, but I'll never forget the moment that, a music hits, which my dad picked out my music. I was using Jason Aldean, She's Country. And that moment in the song, okay, it's time to go. So I open the curtain really fast and I just stand there and I'm just taking it all in. Like, I see my dad off to the side. He's crying and he's just so proud of me. And all I did was, walk through the curtain and I'm just like, wow, this is so cool. There are barely any people there in attendance probably, but it was my first match and it was a huge deal. Out in Granite City, Illinois, very, very small town. But yeah, my dad was there for my first match, and it was just a moment that I'll never forget, walking through the curtain for the very first time.
And those are the moments that are worth, all the training and everything that goes into pro wrestling, is to be able to just to be able to walk out and your dad's out there crying.
Yeah, it's pretty, it's pretty cool. That moment is so clear in my head.
So when it came to training and beginning your training, what would you say was the hardest times of training? Because I'm sure everybody has that moment where you think to yourself, "Oh man, do I really want to be a pro wrestler? Is this something I want to go through on the daily basis?" Did you ever have that type of moment? And if you did, how'd you overcome it?
Okay, so a lot of people, because I see this, because I still train. I think I'm one of the few girls that have been around a little bit that still train regularly. So I see new students come and go all the time, and I feel like a lot of especially women, they think it's going to be total divas where everything's just peachy and they don't know really what to expect. I knew because I watched my dad go through it. I mean, we literally had a ring in my grandpa's backyard, and I'd watch him and some of the other guys train day in, day out. I'd see him at the shows. So I was already a little bit, exposed to it. So I knew what to expect. The hardest thing for me was smiling. I'm in the ring and I'm smiling. I was so excited to be there, and I'm just naturally a very happy, positive person. So to kick that was probably the hardest thing for me. But as for, taking the bumps, taking the hits and everything like that, I mean, that was all pretty easy for me.
And that's the advantages too of being a second generation star, is because you saw what your dad went through, and then when it comes to you, it's oh, if my dad can do it, I can do this too, right? Did you have that motivation in you?
No, I maybe a little bit, but if it wasn't for me, I know if something's not for me. I did accounting. I've loved every job that I've ever had. I was let me see. I was a pharmacy technician. Loved that job. Did it for years. I was a manager at a Claire's store. I loved every single job that I've ever had. If I don't like something, I know right away, and I'm not going to waste my time or waste anybody else's time. Same thing with like relationships. Like I know right away whether or not we're going to have a connection. So it's pointless. So yeah, like I did accounting for one day, and I was gonna tell him by lunchtime, like, hey, this just isn't for me. But I waited till the end of the day. I did one day of accounting, like an accounting desk job. And I'm just like, oh my, no, not for me. So I don't think he would have been disappointed if I decided to not do it. But, I'm doing it for myself, but it's just an extra bonus that he happens to, love and be passionate about the wrestling business as well. So he's very proud of me, but I don't think I'd ever be able to disappoint him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes complete sense. Your first match, when did you find out and how did you feel going into it? Because I'm sure everybody becomes nervous about their first match because it's like the match you've been waiting for your whole life. How'd you take it in? I knew, at that time there weren't a lot of girls, like, especially in the Midwest. I was still in the Midwest at the time, in St. Louis, Missouri, and there were very, very few girls. I wasn't ready for my first match, like a lot of people aren't. They have their first match way too soon, and it was okay. I have an athletic background. I'm very good at sports, gymnastics, cheerleading, dance, football, you name it. I've done it. So the athletic background definitely helps, but I had no idea what I was doing. I knew a couple cool things, but really, it was probably really terrible. I'd love to go look it up and see. But yeah, I'm sure it was terrible. Who did you wrestle in your first match? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh, I don't even remember. I remember moments of my match. I don't even remember who my opponent was.
Let's see. We can figure this out.
Sorry if you're listening. No, I don't think she'd be around still.
There's so many of them, right? Where they start and they become the Weekend Warriors and then they just disappear.
Fizzle out. Yeah, and like I said, but back then there weren't that many girls around. Now, I mean, at my school that I train at, we've got like 10 girls, and we've got girls that come and go, like that are, if they're in town, they're like, oh yeah, I want to get in a training session with you, which is awesome.
And you mentioned, like, back when you started, there weren't that many girls, but now it's this, women's wrestling has become the thing in pro wrestling. It's almost like overshadowing the men's, and I think that's so awesome. And recently, this week, the big news was like the Divas term is finally gone, and the WWE, which is the biggest company in the world when it comes to pro wrestling, has taken away the Divas title and made it a women's championship that's similar to the men's, and I think that's so huge. Not just because of WWE, but just in general for pro wrestling, and not to just like just because you're my guest on the show right now, but I felt like when you think of Divas, you think about WWE, but when you think of women's wrestling, you think of the Santana Garretts, you think of everybody else, Christina Von Aries. That's who comes to mind when I think of women's wrestling, and that's cool that the WWE has finally changed that. How do you feel about this? Because women's wrestling really is taking over.
I mean, I feel really good. That gives me more opponents, and I feel really good. And that is a huge moment in women's wrestling and just in wrestling in general. So good for those girls to be able to be a part of, making history. And then, as for women's wrestling, I think it's great. I think, a lot of the girls come into this not really knowing what to expect. I'm seeing that more and more. Like, they don't know the history of wrestling and women's wrestling at all, and that's okay. But they should learn a few fun facts at least, especially when it comes to women's wrestling. But or at least educate themselves on what's going on now on TV and on the independent scene. And I really stress that to a lot of the new girls that are coming to the school where I train. But I think it's absolutely amazing. That's going to give me more and more opponents, and that means more all women shows and just more opportunity.
And I think it also motivates a lot of, girls out there right now who are not involved in wrestling but entertain the idea of wanting to. And I think it's just more talent's going to come out. And you've wrestled quite a lot of different female wrestlers in the past few years that are very talented. And I mentioned the name earlier, Christina Von Airy, who is one of my favorite people in the world, especially, us being from the same area. So, a former guest of the show. How do you feel about the feud that you two guys had?
You know what? She is one of my favorite people that I've met in wrestling, and you wouldn't think that we'd get along so well, but they say opposites attract, and we definitely are complete opposites. Like,
oh yeah, it's
so opposite. But we've had our time, with battling it out here and there, especially towards the beginning. I mean, in Florida, I remember there being two girls aside from myself. When I first started, my first couple years of wrestling, it was me, Leva Bates, and Christina Von Airy. That was it. Like, in the state of Florida, that was pretty much it. So it was us three on every single show. It was mostly me and Christina Von Airy. So she kind of helped me in a lot of ways. She was the first girl to kind of take me under her wing and just kind of help me develop as a fighter. So we've had, quite a few matches, and we go way back. We've got a lot of history. And also, you would never guess, but she taught me how to put on fake eyelashes.
Oh, wow.
So little fun facts for you fans. Yeah, Christina Von Airy taught me how to put on fake eyelashes.
And I know she's going to listen to this, and she's going to pop hard for that one.
Yeah, I love her.
As badass as she is in the ring, she's like the sweetest person ever.
Yeah, I adore her.
So, other than Christina Von Airy, who would you say is some of your favorite opponents to be in the ring with?
That's a toughie. I think Mia Yim is phenomenal. JTNA, whatever. Ivelisse is another one. She's just up there in I hold her at a very high standard. She's amazing all the way around. And Mary Kate, Andrea the Amazon. I've had a lot of fun matches with her. She's a bigger girl, and it's a fun fight whenever I'm in there with her. It's that big girl, small girl story, and I really like wrestling her.
Yeah, all of them great wrestlers, and there's so many more. I mean, you could talk about, Renee Michelle. I don't know. Have you wrestled Renee?
I have wrestled Renee for Game Changer Wrestling out in New Jersey area. I wrestled her, and I won the GCW Women's Championship.
So I love that. This is a perfect segue. Which title have you not won? I love the picture of you that came out. I want to say a year ago, where you're holding all the titles with you, and I think that's such an iconic picture. It's kind of like Mike Tyson holding all his titles.
Yeah, it actually, because Facebook now has that thing where it's they remind you of what happened a year ago. Mm-hmm. So it, you're pretty spot on. I think it popped up on my timeline yesterday. I was wow. 1 year ago you posted this picture, me with all the titles. Yeah, I've won quite a few, and I don't know, 2015 was a phenomenal year, and this year's been pretty darn good as well. So I'm excited to see what the rest of this year has in store, because that's a big year to top.
Yeah, absolutely. Throughout your years of wrestling, what would you say was the best advice that you've ever received, either from your dad or from any other pro wrestlers out there?
Best advice. Well, my dad, he always has great advice and just funny little sayings. And a couple that stand out. It's just over the last year, he's just stay relevant. Stay relevant. That's been his advice to me over the last year, the most recent advice. And then, he's just filled with just kind of funny little phrases. And then also Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, he is always full of good advice, whether it's in ring or personal advice, full of knowledge.
Absolutely. And we didn't get into it too much, but you trained with Scott Hall and Larry Zbyszko, I believe, a little bit, and trained with Cody.
Yeah. And who else?
And Cody, I think you were training alongside Cody Hall.
Yeah. He trained at the same school, Team Vision Dojo here in Orlando, Florida. They hold the I Believe in Wrestling events. And yeah, same thing. Tim Zbyszko, Larry's kid, trained there as well. So yeah, a lot of second generation wrestlers coming out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. And all so much talent. You know, Cody Hall's out there in Japan doing his thing with the Bullet Club. You know, you've had some experience in Japan. How is the culture difference from Japan and America? And did you have like a culture shock being out there?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, a little bit. So I live in Orlando. So I'm originally from a really small town, Ocala. Which is not even Ocala. I'm from Bellevue, Florida, which is super, super small. Like, we don't even have a Walmart. That's how small it is.
Oh, wow. And every town has a Walmart.
I know. No Walmart, no Starbucks, nothing like that. So it's a really small town. So living in Orlando the last 6 years, it's absolutely crazy. You know, city and traffic and craziness. People are loud. It's so diverse. So going to Japan was a nice little change because everything is so peaceful. When I go to Japan, I live right outside of Tokyo. And it's just really, really quiet and everybody's just really polite and it's just peaceful. So going there, I was not expecting it to be quite like that. And then also, even like my first show there, the crowd, you know, over in America, you know, certain parts, especially the crowd, they're so obnoxious and loud, which I love. I do love that. And they're very like, you know, if they like something, they'll tell you. If they hate something, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Which I like, but in Japan, they don't really cheer. If they like something, they don't really get excited or clap, or they don't show that emotion. The fans I'm talking about. So my first match there, I was feeling very insecure. Like, oh my gosh, why aren't they clapping for that? You know, like in my head, I'm like asking myself, like, what's going on? You know? But they're just a lot different. They're really like intent on like watching the show. They're just watching it, and every once in a while they'll blurt out a name. Like if they want the person to kick out, they'll just blurt out Io, Mayu, or, you know, Santana. Usually they don't blurt out the American girls' names, but they like the Japanese girls. But that's okay. So that was a huge difference from, you know, America to Japan.
Yeah, it's awesome to see that. I wasn't into Japanese wrestling too much before, and then, you know, I heard about Prince Devitt, who's Finn Balor, and Shinsuke Nakamura, and started checking it out. And I think it's cool to watch it because you can tell the fans are watching wrestling like it's supposed to be, like an artwork. You know, art is being created in that ring, and I think that's kind of missing sometimes in America. But, you know, you gotta love American fans too.
Right.
So we're coming down to the end of the podcast, and I purposely left out a lot of questions that I want to ask you because I want to do a part 2. I think it'd be a lot of fun to have you back on.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, to end this podcast, you know, one of my favorite questions to ask is, you know, a lot of kids out there are suffering from having that motivation or that hunger to go out and reach their dreams. You know, what's some advice that you can give out to listeners out there, whether they're kids or adults, that are you know, suffering from having that motivation or being discouraged from going out and reaching their dreams, whatever it may be?
You know what? I would say, you know, you can be anything you want to be. You put in the work, something good's going to come of it. You put in the effort, you know, you're working hard, and I'm living proof. You know, I had a goal in mind, so set your goal and work hard towards it and just don't quit. Keep moving forward and don't stop until you get there.
Absolutely. I couldn't even agree any more than that. You know, just go out and do it. And that's the way that I say, you think it, you can do it.
Exactly.
So, you got a match coming up, a couple of matches coming up with two of my peoples, Deonna Purrazzo and Thunder Rosa. Would you like to plug that?
Yes, I've got quite a few matches coming up, but I'm wrestling Deonna Purrazzo this Sunday in Providence, Rhode Island. I've got a match with Thunder Rosa at the Cauliflower Alley Club in Las Vegas. I also have my 3rd Japan tour coming up here very soon. and I'm going to the UK as well with Stardom, which is the all-women's Japanese wrestling company that I wrestle for, and I'm also one of their champions, the Wonder of Stardom champion. So aside from that, I've got Chile coming up April 17th, Shine Wrestling right before that. Got Las Vegas, Cauliflower Alley Club. I mean, I stay busy, so come June I'll have a day to rest, I'm sure. But until then, I'm going to be nonstop.
There you go. That's the way to do it. The grind never stops. For the listeners out there, I know you have a bunch of social media outlets. Name them all.
Okay, here we go. Facebook, Santana Garrett 522. And, I mean, just Google my name, SANTANA GARRETT. Twitter, and I just downloaded Snapchat, which people have been asking me to download forever now. So I have Snapchat now. So Twitter and, Instagram and Snapchat is just my name, Santana Garrett, and Twitter at Santana Garrett _ So follow me. I'm pretty, fun. Sometimes my videos are usually really funny. You can only watch them a couple times or you get really annoyed though.
No,
I do anyway.
I think anybody that follows you won't be disappointed. You post the best pictures out there, funniest videos. It's a pleasure having you on. You know, I talked to a lot of different wrestlers, and everybody mentions about Santana Garrett and how sweet you are. And today you have proved their point. So I appreciate you taking the time and doing this podcast with me.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody for putting me over and telling everybody how nice I am. That's really sweet. And we'll definitely have to do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you once again.
All right. Thank you.